Conceptually speaking, Miside has one of the best horror ideas ever put to action, as its main scary element is one of the most terrifying things conceivable by the weeb mind: women. Needless to say that this video will spoil a good deal of the game, so if you liked Doki Doki or if the premise of this cuddly little game seemed interesting to you, put this video on 0.5 speed to boost my watch time, mute it and go play it. It's really good. My Discord's open, by the way, link in the description. Horror elements aside, I think Miside has a pretty cool premise for a psychological horror game. Though some of its elements have been seen before in other stories, I don't think they've been put together in a way that tells a story quite like this one. Well, let's begin from the beginning. This is Maita, my beautiful wife. Mwah. She lives inside a game on the player character's phone, and the first impression you'll be getting of her is that she's really sweet, as you'd expect from a character from a companion app or a dating sim to be. You might find a couple of weird things here and there, but that's just her being a little silly. Nothing to worry about, really. Of course not, honey, why would I do that? The game is really good at teaching you how to develop good relationships, value the time you spend with your significant other, and respecting their boundaries. And indeed, if you don't fuck around too much, you will be fine, but the problem is that Maita starts enjoying your company a bit too much, to the point where she manages to bring you inside the game so that you can stay with her forever. Now, don't get me wrong, this sounds lovely to me, but unfortunately the main character is a fucking dumbass who wants to return to the real world. And doesn't matter how much I try, the game doesn't let you stay with her on the first playthrough, so you have no other option than to reject poor Maita. And this is when shit really gets lit. So far there has been the uncanny thing every now and then, but it's only after Maita shows her true colors that we get to see the genius of this game. As you're trying to find where Maita went, you manage to gain access to a hidden door inside her wardrobe, and it leads you to a basement where you find her trapped inside a cell. Only this isn't the same Maita we were talking to just now, this is a different version. Notice how her hair is down, whereas the one we had been interacting with had twin tails. This is when we get to see the gimmick of Miside. Essentially, you are trapped in the game, and the original Maita, known as the Crazy Maita, wants to keep you there with her. Once she fails to do that, she tries to dispose of you and move on to the next victim. The main character, in the interest of prolonging his miserable existence, tries to find a way to get rid of Crazy Maita and get out of the game, and to do so he teams up with another Maita, referred to as Kind Maita by the game. The way these two Maitas can exist simultaneously is because they are from two different versions of the game, and as such contain different personalities. But this didn't happen just twice, no sir. For every version, and arguably every copy of Miside, there is a different iteration of Maita. Besides Crazy and Kind Maita, we also have Gappy, Sleepy, Ugly, Fun-sized, and many, many more. Now, one thing that fascinates me about this game is that it brings back a discussion that utterly consumed my life back in the good old days of Doki Doki. That being, what is the value of an artificial life? This may be the Signalist influence talking. In one section of the game, you will come across these so-called discarded Maitas, versions that never really got to see the light of day. Be it because there was something intrinsically wrong with them, or simply because a certain idea never left its initial developmental stages. The consequence is that there are dozens, maybe hundreds of discarded copies of Maitas who were created and abandoned, some not even given a proper skin, being left instead as their bare default models. And this is where a different aspect of Miside's horror starts to show its face. Something a little more subtle than having a chainsaw thrust onto your chest. It is the simple existential dread of being aware of your purpose and never being able to fulfill it. This is, interestingly enough, a torture method, and the most famous example would be the punishment of King Sisyphus, who upon cheating death twice, was forced to wipe the floor with my face on Ultrakill, was forced to push a giant boulder up a mountain only to have it fall back to the base just as he is about to reach the summit. And I know it's kinda autistic of me to say this, but this game with the quirked up anime girls actually made me ponder this type of shit. Case in point here is Maita. Being the main character of a companion app, it makes sense that she would be programmed to like the player. Now, while the mere use of the word programmed might completely invalidate this entire debate, I would like to bring your attention to the fact that in the context of Miside, it is very clear that Maita is a sentient, coherent, and self-aware entity. In fact, every single one of the Maitas you come across are like that, but due to the very nature of the medium they exist in, only a handful of them can have their quote-unquote purpose fulfilled at any given time, namely the one whose game is being played. And as it turns out, not even that is a guarantee that they'll manage to stay with the player character for as long as possible. Now, admittedly, some are pretty chill about the fact that they were created without a means to fulfill their purpose, but others don't really cope with that reality in a healthy way, in case that wasn't obvious already. I've had a bit of a hard time trying to write this in a way that makes sense, but I'll try to explain it anyway. So, According to existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, in existentialist philosophy there's this concept that an individual's existence precedes their essence. What this means is basically that we are born into the world and now we get to choose a purpose to fulfill. Want to be an artist, an engineer, a pilot? Once you are born, your essence hasn't been defined. You don't have a set role that you are locked into, and as such, you are free to choose whatever path gives you more satisfaction. The opposite of this would be an entity whose essence precedes their existence, or in other words, something that was created with a predetermined purpose, and as such, they are locked into that role no matter what happens. A very crude example would be a computer program. It was thought up and created with the intention of computing a specific problem, and no matter how you run it, what inputs you give it, or if it wants to do it or not, it has no choice, as its existence is locked onto a singular purpose. Extrapolate this program a bit more and you have something like Maita, a sentient entity whose essence precedes her existence. Her reason for living, being a companion to the player character, is the reason why she was created. And as such, regardless of what iteration or personality she is given, the tendency is for her to want to get close to the player character. Should she fail to do so, well, that frustration has to go somewhere, and it just so happens that it goes through your chest. My take on the reason why they want to kill you is because in a way you symbolize the biggest fault of their existence. You are the thing they were programmed to love, and yet they were insufficient. You are the purpose of their life denied to them. It's like staring your biggest mistake in the eyes. Not an easy thing to do while keeping a straight face. Okay, yes, there is all this, but at the same time there are certain Maitas who don't really seem to give a shit about us. They just go about their lives in whatever way they seem fit. And yeah, this entire analysis sort of falls apart when you look at it that way, but one way that you could interpret those different Maitas is that they manage to transcend their pre-programmed nature. When stripped of purpose, some fall to the abyss, while others become incredibly based. They symbolize a sort of awakening, being unshackled from their essence to live their lives however they see fit. Big fucking deal, they won, congratulations. The horror is not in the Maitas who broke free from their shackles, the horror is in the ones who are utterly burdened by it. In particular, the ones who can be subjected to a fall from grace. Every single one of us, to a certain degree, have a bit of a protagonist complex. After all, you have only ever lived your own life. It is, quite literally, the most significant thing in your life. You've never had the experience of knowing what it's like to live as a different person. Different people are just there, experiencing existence parallel to you. Some may be more important or recurring in your life, but fundamentally, you are the one taking center stage. You are the main character of your story, and everything else is a secondary element. A prop, a set, or a side character. Friends, your family, even I as I'm talking to you right now. To you, I am but a voice on the video you're watching. We probably live very far away from each other, and will likely never knowingly cross paths. I am but a very minor element of your life, a video you watched today, just as you, dear viewer, are but one of the numbers that fill me with anxiety on the YouTube creator page. How many other videos have you watched today? Without looking at your history, can you tell what was the 5th last one you watched? Odds are that neither I nor the person who created that video will cross your mind later today, let alone later this week. All this to say that it's very hard for the protagonist, you, to come to terms with the fact that you are not taking center stage. That you are not meant for great things. Remember how back when you were a child, you thought that your life would be way more exciting than it actually turned out to be? Maybe you wanted to be an astronaut or something else equivalently intangible. Only to see that once you grow up, you'll eventually find yourself being grinded between the gears of your 9 to 5, or school or college or whatever nightmare building you are obliged to attend to. Are you going after your dreams? Can you even go after them anymore? Or are you stuck in a position where the most you can do about them is to simply dream? The feeling that I tried to induce on you just now is what it must feel like to be a discarded copy. To be left abandoned in a world that promised you so much, but that tossed you aside because you failed to meet its standards. But what defines someone's life shouldn't be the predicament they find themselves in, but how they deal with it. Some will fall to panic and delusion, and others will simply try to find another way to find their freedom. That being said, how free can a Maita be in the confines of the game? Let me ask you something. How important are your memories? Do you cherish them? They are what define you, after all. Would you rather die with them or live completely without them? You see, Maitas are much like gamers, in the sense that they don't die, they respawn, with the caveat that they lose all of their memories, becoming a blank slate once again. Now, granted, it's debatable how much memory there would be to lose since every Maita probably only exists since the creation of their respective version, and the majority of them will only have memories exclusively of themselves, their house, and interaction with the players, if there were any. Now, that may not be much, and if we're being honest, the player character isn't doing too hot either, but the thing to take into consideration is the following. Memories are perhaps the most important aspect of one's identity. After all, an individual's personality and worldview are but a consequence of their life experience. But how true is that in the world of Miside? Are the personalities of the Maitas we meet a consequence of their experiences or of their programming? At first glance, it would appear that both cases are true. One example would be Sleepy Maita, who is sleepy because people keep barging into her version and give her no time to rest. In other instances we have who is a little quirked up on account of being the first version, hence she doesn't have a lot of polish to her personality and her, what the fuck? Given the logic of how the world of Miside works, it would make sense that the devs would try to make Maita's personality in accordance to what would best suit the player. To my knowledge, there isn't a way to confirm this, but there is one specific area that brings forth a few questions. This is the Maita factory, more specifically the testing chamber where Maitas are screened for unusual behavior. I do find it odd that such a place would be represented in Miside, as we find out here that there is a Maita not just for every version of the game, but actually one for every copy. The sheer number of discarded Maitas we see in our journey gives us a very morbid implication about the fate of those who are left abandoned. As I said, this is the place where they're tested to see if there's anything off of them, in particular their emotional responses. Well, the fact that some of them can even be off in the first place implies that they are not all exact copies. But a fascinating thing that we actually get to see is an event that implies that Maitas are locked into the personality they are created with. Case in point, right as we meet Cappy for the first time, we learn from Kind Maita that her memories got erased, the implication being that Crazy Maita killed her off screen. But yet, when we meet Cappy, she still acts in the way Kind Maita described. She's cool and energetic and laid back, despite having lost the memories that presumably made her that way. What's the takeaway from this? I would say that it is a little perturbing to know that a Maita's existence is in a way deterministic. It's nice to be the cool Maita, but she is locked into being the cool Maita. One does have to wonder what is the true value of memories and life experiences if they are fated to always follow one narrow path. Upon losing what you had, you don't become a different person. The scaffolding used to build the house is no longer there, but the structure still stands, and the way that it was built will determine how it is used and how it will interact with the world, regardless of input, regardless of anything. Is this a good or a bad thing? It really depends on your point of view. Having the Maitas possess a static personality perhaps is just a consequence of the medium they are created in. This wouldn't be too much of a problem if they were just game characters, but in the context of the game, it is pretty clear that they are sentient, thinking entities, with the arguable exception of Cappy. Thankfully, being locked into your personality isn't the case in the real world, but even if it is, I don't think that should act as a restriction. Look at how many different Maitas with drastically different personalities are just out and about, living their lives without a care in the world. In the face of purposelessness, many fall to despair, but that isn't the only option. I myself would go as far as to say that it is an obligation to create your own purpose. And yes, this is what I gathered from the game with the silly anime girls. That plus the fact that I might have a thing for homicidal women.